So he's 18 months old, and yeah, he got tonsillitis, and it was a sudden change overnight. So he woke up sort of a completely different little boy. He got aggression, and he developed OCD. He developed a tic where he'd rub his ear on his shoulder like this. And he had severe anxiety as well. He had separation anxiety, didn't it, from us? And like sensory issues with clothes.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that? That just he didn't like wearing them?
Yeah, he felt as though his clothes were burning him. So he would almost scream in pain when you try and get him dressed.
Yeah, and then... Sorry, go on.
It got so bad at one stage we just couldn't really leave the house.
Gosh, and Lucy, I mean, what was this like for you guys as a family then?
Yeah, it was a really dark time for us. It was a really bad time. You just feel helpless as a mum. You want to get your son better and find out what's wrong. And also I was worried about my daughter because we couldn't leave the house. She couldn't, her life was impacted as well. And it's a really, really dark time for us.
Yeah, and so, you know, you went to the doctors and to try and find out what was wrong. And what kind of things were you being told then?
Just, we went a number of times, and they looked at Jack's inner ear to see if that was related to the tic. And also they looked at autism, but he was so young, it's a bit young to diagnose it officially. But they never actually linked any of the symptoms, the behavioural symptoms, to the tonsillitis.
And did you at all think that, Lucy? Did you ever think it was connected? Because
never, it literally never would have crossed my mind that the tonsillitis, you know, would have caused these sort of symptoms. So it was a big shock, but we're you know, pleased that it could be helped.
And I know, Lily, you're the big sister, aren't you? And you really love your little brother. And what was it like for you? Was it quite scary?
I felt sad because he was sad.
Yeah. Whoa. And so, how did then this get resolved?
So, by basically, my wife's amazing at, you know, searching the internet.
Yeah.
So
Dr. Google. Yeah. Hey, listen, we're all there as parents every night. I'm looking at what's going on. Yeah.
And she actually came across a clip from the telly. And there was a family on there, and they were describing the symptoms of their little boy, and it was like one of those light bulb moments for us, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They were basically describing Jack.
Yeah.
And by this point, Jack had tonsillitis 11 times, and he was just unrecognisable. We couldn't leave the house, so it came really. It saved him, didn't it?
Yeah. We're so grateful for that family. And we Googled the doctor that they had seen, and he saved Jack's quality of life. He was perfectly fine.
So what did you find out that it was then?
It's a condition called PANDAS. Basically, it causes inflammation on a part of the brain, which controls motor movement and behaviour. So every time he has an immune response, antibodies would put pressure on that part of the brain, causing these symptoms.
And then how was it cured? How did you solve it? Because now, a few years on, he's a healthy little, happy little boy, isn't he?
Yeah. We actually looked up the doctor who was on the TV programme, and he treated Jack, Dr. Tim Uby, and he put him on a course of antibiotics, and the change was amazing. I mean, you wouldn't believe the change in about 3 days.
Gosh, because you just wouldn't think it's an infection-related thing, wouldn't you, when you're talking about personality traits?
Yeah.
And you mentioned the doctor as well. We can actually have a quick chat with him now as well. I'm just going to bring in Dr. Tim Uby too. I mean, can you just explain to us what this PANDAS is then, Doctor? And you know, how common is it?
So it's probably more common than we think, because if you look for it, you find it. And one of the things with PANDAS is that we have to raise awareness so that doctors can actually think about diagnosing it. Now, PANDAS is a really, it's a very complex acronym, but basically what it means is that you get a child who gets a strep infection, and strep is a really common bacteria that causes things like sore throats, chest infections and skin infections. And the body's immune system creates a response to the infection and raises antibodies. That's exactly what the immune system should do. But what happens in children with PANDAS is that the antibodies that are raised against the streptococcus then cross-react, as Neil has described, with a part of the brain called the basal ganglia, and it tickles the brain effectively, and that causes symptoms like tics, obsessive compulsive behaviours, and in some children they can end up wetting or having increased urinary frequency, and also food restriction.
And is it easy to diagnose then, once you know what you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the classical patient with PANDAS is a child that's developed completely normally, and then all of a sudden, bang, one day the switch is thrown and you've got a completely different child. And that's exactly what happened with Jack. You know, he was a completely normal child, and overnight there was a change in his behaviour, and he had the tics and he had the obsessive compulsive behaviours.
Yeah.
And he responded incredibly well to treatment. He had a 95% improvement in his symptoms within 3 days, as Neil and Lucy have described.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, that it took a long time for these guys to find out what it was, and it involved seeing you on a TV programme. There might be people watching now who are going through something similar. So why is it a case of it is so hard to get a diagnosis for it, if, you know, when you're going to the doctors and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question, because actually the connection between streptococcal infections and movement disorders is something that's gone on for over 100 years. That there was a condition called Sydenham's chorea, which is a movement disorder associated with rheumatic fever, a very old-fashioned disease, but still very relevant today. And I think that what we're seeing with PANDAS is just basically an extension of that. But unfortunately, I think there's a lack of awareness amongst health professionals. We did a survey through the Children's E-Hospital about 2 years ago, and we looked at the number of GPs that were aware of PANDAS, and only 10% of GPs had actually heard of it. So I think it's about raising awareness, making sure that we educate health professionals, but really, really importantly, that health professionals incorporate it in their list of differential diagnoses.
Yeah, it sounds like it's absolutely crucial. Doctor, thank you very much. And guys, for you now, what's life like now? Jack's fully back to normal and...
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. He's doing so well at school.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't recognise him a couple of years ago. And we sort of made it our mission to raise awareness and help others. Like, we're so grateful to that family that we saw, and we want to do the same.
Yeah. And Jack, do you like school? Yeah. Who's your favourite teacher? Do you have a teacher that's your favourite? Do you want to say hello to them?
Mrs. Welling. You know, Mrs. Welling.
Do you want to give her a little wave?
Oh, but I don't know.
Yeah. And Lily, are you obviously are very happy now that your little brother's okay, aren't you? Yeah. And you have lots of fun together, don't you two? Yeah, good. Well, it is lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for coming in. Like you say, you know, it's about raising awareness for these things, isn't it, too?